17 after 6, and let me tell you, I'm happy to get into this discussion to really get some clarity and to break down all the elements. So many moving parts to this particular story, and the much anticipated PSC nomination debate happens today in the House. I'm sure it might be another hotly contested and contentious and tumultuous, probably at times, debate. We'll see how things pan out, and I'm sure many a soundbite and a moment will come out of the debate. I could already anticipate that in advance. But to give us some perspective, to give us some clarity, to walk us through the process, I welcome again. I'm always happy to have former PSC member with me. And indeed, Mr. Martin George, a voice and a counsel when it comes to this kind of discussion that we lean towards. Mr. George, good morning and welcome again to The Brew.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Jason, and good morning to your viewers, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. So
today, the debate happens in the House. I want to start with that particular angle immediately. What can we expect? Would a particular result come out of today's debate, or is today's debate just more or less the first of other debates? Is it just another theatrical performance by those charged with making these particular decisions in the House? What can we anticipate today?
Well, the thing is, Jason, it's good that you made reference to theatrical because, there is the chance and the risk that today could descend into the theater of the absurd if it is that you have, spurious or scandalous allegations being made. I saw, something that has been foreshadowed or forecast indicating that, there's going to be an issue raised as to whether one candidate went to bishops, and I mean, I cannot for the life of me imagine what that could have to do with a serious debate in the Parliament on choosing nominees for the Police Service Commission. So we have to hear what the opposition has to say primarily, because at the end of the day, it appears that the government feels fairly satisfied with the candidates that have been put forth, and they would therefore be proposing the motions to suggest, well, that these 5 persons, that is former Justice of Appeal Judith Jones, you have Rajiv Prasad, who's an attorney at law, you have Maxine King, you have Maxine Atong, and you have Ian Ramdani. So these are the persons that they will be putting forth. And of course, the government, the way it happens is that for each nominee that is tabled, the government will read out the bio and the CV, of this person, the individual, given all their achievements and, all the things which ought to make them, more than suitably qualified and capable to sit and serve as members of the Police Service Commission. And while one is happy to have, this process take place in a manner where it's open to public scrutiny, so therefore you say for transparency and accountability, that's good. On the other hand, we don't want it to descend into, a farce whereby you have, persons, their names and characters being dragged through the mud for no good reason other than, one may feel that you want to oppose for opposing's sake.
Well, Mr. George, I want to say, because as you make mention of that, it's already started. I saw some utterances. I heard the utterances of Wade Mark over the weekend, and I'll go into some detail. Ian Ramdani, who you just mentioned, who's a security expert. There's some question marks from Mr. Mark and the opposition concerning a conflict of interest around some kind of contract awarded. As it relates to Maxine King, who is a wealth management consultant, there seems to be some kind of issue with her affiliation, business ties to some family in Tobago who's apparently close to the Prime Minister. Now, that's the claim. It's not from me. And then the last one from Mr. Mark, he took issue with Maxine Atong's, I guess, picture and her closeness with the former Minister of Labour, Ms. Primus. So it's already started. They're already trying to put some issues there into the public domain to more or less disqualify 3 out of the 5 mentioned under this nomination for the
Right,
PSC.
and you see, I mean, and that's the good word you've used, disqualify, and that's what the issue really is. In other words, is there something so meritorious, so substantial, and, you know, so germane, which presents itself as an egregious obstacle and reason whereby you will say, listen, in all fairness, in all substance, in all seriousness, it would not be proper for this person to sit as a member of the PSC. You would have seen that a previous name was called Mr. Ernest Coilas, and objections were raised, and it seems that that was quickly withdrawn. So the fact of the matter is that no one is to say that you can't raise objections. Of course you could, but they must be based on substance. Now, in terms of Mr. Ramdani, what I saw Mr. Wademark mention in relation to a connection with a major security firm, and he, you know, alluded to the fact that this major security firm does have to go to the Commissioner of Police for applications for firearms licenses, then, you know, I see the point that he's making there is one that I guess can be open for discussion. And of course, if it is that it can be shown that there is a risk, if there is a risk of some influence, then of course that is something we as a nation ought to guard ourselves against. So that's why I keep saying, Jason, there's nothing wrong in persons raising questions and raising the issues, but they must be meritorious and they must not be frivolous, spurious, and specious.
Is there any justification for the concerns shown towards Maxine King and Maxine Atong? I mean, again, one is based on connection with a family that there is claim that this family is close to the Prime Minister, and the other claim is that this is, of course, with Ms. Atong, who's a financial consultant, that she's chummy and close with, I guess, former members of the administration. A picture, he was parading a picture, you know, of Ms. Atong and a former minister, someone who's not even in public and political life anymore. Any justification for that kind of concern there?
The thing about it is that when you look at it, based upon what has been put there, unless there is something more substantial, and who knows, maybe, and I mean, of course, we have to wait until we hear the debate and hear what the opposition has to say, maybe they do have things that are more substantial and, you know, that really, you know, ought to be looked at or investigated. And if that's the case, then by all means, let's do so, because we don't want to end up in a situation where you have things spilling out thereafter and then the commission is being compromised. So, of course, we want to get it right and get it right the first time. But what I keep saying is that if it is that you have things of merit, then sure, the public is willing to listen and hear you. But do not come there with, as you say, just, I mean, a photograph, which by itself, what does it say, you know, in terms of the allegation that you're now trying to make, you know, that you're trying to extrapolate from this photograph? It just doesn't seem to necessarily mean that this person is disqualified from becoming or being a member of the Police Service Commission.
Mr. George, today's process, the debate, is this going to be a simple majority vote? Give me the mechanics, the breakdown as to how things can go through, because the reality is, as soon as possible, we need this PSC board to be nominated, to be verified, to go forward, to do their work, to bring forward a commissioner of police. What's the mechanics today for this debate in the House?
Right, okay, so it is a simple majority vote. So the names will be tabled. As I say, the CVs, the biosketches will be read out in the Parliament. It will go as a matter of public record, you know, the service that these people have done and, you know, what qualifies them to be members of the PSC. Of course, the constitutional requirements will probably be alluded to, you know, in that you must have persons who are qualified in law, finance, human resources, management. So, you know, they will, I guess the government will show that, look, yes, we've covered all our bases in that regard in terms of the constitutional requirements as to who shall, you know, constitute the Police Service Commission. And then, of course, the opposition will have their say in relation to each and every candidate. So they would have a chance to either agree or object, or even if it's just to raise questions without necessarily objecting. And I am hoping that the proceedings can occur in a manner with some decorum and decency and, in a manner befitting the Parliament, which is our highest tribunal in the land. So we need to understand that. So, I am waiting to see how it unfolds, but we anticipate from, as you say, what Mr. Mark said over the weekend, that they are definitely going to be raising these issues in relation to at least 3 of the nominees.
I mean, on paper and in theory, everything you just said, Mr. George, is what we will expect and we would hope to see delivered from those who hold high office in this country. But the reality is today it's going to be, and I say this with no apology, I'm sure there will be some sound bites and some moments there that will leave much to be desired. And as they go through the debate, I want to ask you now, knowing that you understand this process in an intimate way, do you think that simple majority is something that they should reconsider going forward as it relates to the vote, that simple majority vote, because it obviously gives an advantage to the government?
The thing is, at this point, it's not such a complicated issue for filling the members of this position. So therefore, I don't think they should change it to anything more difficult than that, because otherwise we'll be locked in this cycle, for months and months and months. And we definitely are going to be stymied because it's going to be, so difficult to get, candidates whom they can both agree upon. At this point, the way the Parliament is functioning, with both sides so divisive and so divided, they probably couldn't agree even on the color of the sky. If you pass a motion, if you table a motion today to say, well, we're asking the members of Parliament on both sides to agree that today is Wednesday, they will probably be debating that till midnight. And then they will say, no, well, now we're into Thursday, so it can't be Wednesday. They don't seem to be able to agree on the simplest of things. So to change that simple majority, I think would make it even more tortuous and painful for us as citizens to sit and watch the charade that sometimes passes for parliamentary behavior.
Why should this debate and all what's happening matter to Trinidad and Tobago? When we consider, let's say, Marlon from Manzanilla, Patsy from Pinal, you think of Carol from Caranage or Sheldon from Scarborough. Why should it matter to Trinidad and Tobago, the average citizen who's just getting up, trying to make the ends meet their bills, feed their family?
Well, because these are the pillars of our constitutional democracy. These institutions, they form the basis and bedrock of our civil society. So it is important. So it may not impinge or impact on you in a personal way to say that, look, your life feels any better or feels any worse by this commission being constituted. But this is one of the building blocks of our society. So therefore, it's immensely important for this process to be completed so that we can move forward with the business of the Police Service Commission.
I want to take it now to the merit list, Mr. George, because granted, we get through, as we said earlier, the theater of the Parliament, the theater of that debate, the back and forth, and let's say they come to a particular decision, whether it's the 5 names presented or they go back to the drawing board and bring forward other names. Let's look past now that moment. What's going to happen to the merit list? Is it that they will pull the original merit list that caused all this controversy, or is it going to be a call now for an entirely new list of names on this merit list? Guide me in that regard.
Right. So the fact of the matter is that at this point, we don't have any clear indication as to what's the status of that previous merit list in terms of what happened after it was allegedly withdrawn. That's, the best I can say based upon what has been told to us. So I think that when one considers it holistically, for public confidence, they may have to consider whether they are going to try to go with that list at all, or whether the entire process needs to be restarted. Now, the thing is, Jason, there's no easy way out of this conundrum that we find ourselves in here in Trinidad and Tobago, because I'll tell you, if you have to start over the process, there are persons who may be able to claim and file high court actions for judicial review to say, listen, I am being disadvantaged or disenfranchised because I was, successful in certain aspects of the previous process. I was high up on the merit list, and now you're starting this over, and I lose the possibility of getting back that same position or being so successful. Listen, it is a minefield going forward. I actually admire citizens who, at this stage and in this particular scenario, who are willing to put themselves forth, because this is truly national service you're going to be doing to try to pull Trinidad and Tobago out of the fire in this circumstance here. Because you see, Jason, we don't even know the details of this supposedly previous merit list in terms of who were the names on that list, what happened after the list was allegedly, withdrawn, according to what the president has told us. Is it that names were changed subsequently? It is just a total mess. So, I think to try to even touch that, to try to resurrect the ghost of that, debacle, I think would be, just creating a fresh new disaster. So I think they may have to look at a new process entirely.
Okay, because interestingly, yesterday we had a conversation with the former Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith. Double G was on the Morning Brew yesterday, and it seems that he is still very much hopeful. He seems to be still with his eyes on the prize. Is there any chance at all for Mr. Griffith going forward, or is it more or less the end of the road in terms of his role and position there within the police service?
So let's look at it how it works. Now, if you recall, previously there was the prime ministerial veto, which you saw being exercised by former Prime Minister Manning when the name of former Deputy Commissioner Stephen Williams had been tabled in the Parliament. And Prime Minister Manning at that time exercised his prime ministerial veto, and he, so even though Mr. Williams was the top candidate and the person who was basically supposed to be a shoe-in for the job of commissioner, Prime Minister Manning exercised his prime ministerial veto, and that was the end of Mr. Williams's nomination in that regard. Now, subsequent to that, there was a national outcry, and people said, no, this is not right. You can't have basically the prime minister choosing who the commissioner of police should be. So it was then changed, and the law was amended to create basically what is now a parliamentary majority. Now, realistically, Jason, in Trinidad and Tobago, anyone who is in government, you would normally have the prime minister in control of his or her troops in parliament. So basically, even though you have removed the direct prime ministerial veto to say, well, okay, my one vote just scuttles the entire thing, it's now a majority vote. But if the prime minister is head of that majority, then I would assume that, he would be in contact with his persons in the parliament, and they would have discussed how they are voted. So it's, while it has changed it from being a direct prime ministerial veto, in effect, if a prime minister is in charge of his troops and in control of his troops in parliament, then basically what the prime minister wants is what is going to happen in terms of the vote. So in that regard, and given the history and antecedents, particularly where you have the present prime minister having indicated publicly that he, wrote to the former Public Police Service Commission indicating that he had lost confidence in Mr. Gary Griffith, then one wonders, if I were, to gamble on the odds, I would say it does not look particularly good for Mr. Griffith at this point. But this is Trinidad and Tobago. One never knows how these things play out and what, things may be taking place behind the scenes. But, from the public posturing, I would say that the chances do not look good at all, because if you recall, the parliamentary veto was exercised in the last iteration of this process, whereby, if you recall, Mr. Gary Griffith actually was not the number 1 candidate, he was not the number 2 candidate, he was not the number 3 candidate, he was actually number 4 on the list. If you recall, Jason, and this is why I always urge my fellow countrymen to always remember our history. When that list was sent forth, the government of the day, which is the same government now, they rejected the number 1 candidate, so they exercised their parliamentary veto there. They rejected the number 2 candidate, they rejected the number 3 candidate until they got whom they wanted, which was Mr. Griffith at the time. Now it appears that, things have changed, and maybe Mr. Griffith might have fallen out of favor with maybe certainly the Prime Minister, at least. The Prime Minister has made that clear. So in those circumstances, I guess regardless of where Mr. Griffith actually is on the list, I would imagine that Mr. Rowley would have had his discussions with his parliamentarians as to how they will eventually vote on that matter when it comes to that issue.
So, Mr. George, which brings me now to my final question. After it's all said and done, someone will be chosen, whether it's a man, whether it's a woman. We will have a commissioner of police at some point in time going forward. I mean, it's inevitable. How does that personality now, how does that person going into the office instill confidence, firstly, in the said TTPS, and by extension, the public, after this shambolic and most frustrating process, from the whole breakdown with, of course, Mr. Griffith, to what we're going to experience today and everything that's going to happen in between. How does that person come in now and really bring things back to some place of normalcy?
Well, I think there needs to be that communication of the public trust. I think that's what they really need to get on board with first. So in other words, you have to be open, you have to be transparent, you have to, relate to the public. You can't appear to be hiding things or covering up stuff, and you have to let the public know that, look, hey, listen, okay, stuff has happened in the past. However, this is a new day. It's a clean sheet I'm starting with, and you give me that trust, and I'm going to honor it. So I think there needs to be that type of rapport with the public to try to build back up the image and integrity. And listen, I'll tell you, this is not only just for the police service and whoever is eventually chosen as Commissioner of Police. This is also immensely important for the Police Service Commission, because the last images, the last memories we've had of the previous commission are so painfully tortuous. In terms of the, I mean, you used a beautiful word there, shambolic. That's the only way to describe it. I mean, it was, one debacle after another. It's like you were dreading to hear the news, for each morning, because you're wondering, well, what new drama or bacchanal or confusion is going to take place with the Police Service Commission. So I think whoever is chosen to, populate the new Police Service Commission, they have to definitely come out and come forth to the public and re-establish that bond of trust, because they are put in a very serious position in terms of the responsibility they have. It's a constitutionally appointed commission, so therefore they have to ensure that they bring it back up to that level and standard where members of the public can feel a sense of confidence, trust, and respect for the commission and the commissioners.
Mr. George, thanks as always for the candor. We appreciate the words.
It's always a pleasure.
And we'll see how things pan out today, but I could anticipate, and I'll tell you, I feel there's going to be, as you rightfully said, some drama there in the house today.
The theater of the absurd.
Let's see how things go. All the best. Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay.
We come back and we get into our Green Thumb segment, where we deal with agriculture and the land and the soil and the crops. That segment is up next.